Our long national search is over. HotlineTV has found its new co-host.
Eat it, Anne-Marie Cox.
We see parents who dream big, of honor students and artists. By supporting programs that help children learn, we help parents watch their dreams come true.
Watergate Building in Washington. This is Hotline TV. Now, here's Hotline editor, John Mercurio.
It's Hotline TV, everybody. I'm John Mercurio.
I'm Con Carroll.
Welcome to Hotline TV. Well, the results of the Move On virtual town meeting straw poll are in. Tens of thousands of Move On members voted for which Democrat they believe best represented their views on Iraq. Here to discuss who was most misled into war is our blog editor, Con Carroll. Con, let's get to the results of this straw poll. What did they say to you?
Well, you know what, John? The great thing is there are two results to the straw poll, and
Indeed.
they say a lot. First of all, Move On polled all the members. If you're a member of Move On, you could vote, and among that group, Obama came in first place.
But, interestingly enough...
But they also polled members of their members who actually attended House parties and therefore listened to the entire debate. And in that vote, Obama took third behind John Edwards and, guess who?
I don't know. Tell me.
Bill Richardson.
Bill Richardson. Interesting.
Bill Richardson.
What does that say, though? I mean, what are we hearing? What are we getting from those numbers then?
Well, looking beyond the numbers, looking to what bloggers have been saying about the forum is immediately after the forum was over, Chris Bowers of MyDD had a post up talking about how Bill Richardson had really separated himself away from the pack
with his no residual force.
With his no residual force line.
Bowers
said that was exactly what he was looking for. Marcos came in later and said, you know, the rest of the Democratic field is in one pack, and Bill Richardson has definitely separated himself.
Those bloggers were just chewing on Bill Richardson's red meat.
There is an elite consensus among lefty bloggers that Bill Richardson is the gold standard when it comes to Iraq. So,
and making the point that you've made earlier, which is that basically if you just poll people on
Obama,
the man,
right,
Obama wins, but when they
right,
actually look at the specifics of what he's saying about Iraq, that's when he starts to drop. So they don't love Obama's plan, they love Obama the man.
They love Barack Obama, the man.
Let's move on. On the other side of the blogosphere today, this week, we saw John McCain made a big speech at VMI.
Yes.
How was that received in the blogosphere, which hasn't been that receptive to him at all?
That's true, but McCain is starting a little pattern here. He'll have an event, this time it was the VMI speech, and then he'll follow it up with the blogger conference call to get kind of flood the zone, good coverage for that day. He did it earlier with his online petition, unveiled that, and then a blogger conference call about it that same day. So we're seeing a pattern here for him in handling bloggers, and so far it's working. That
whole speech was so well received by the right. I mean, if you look at people, Charles Krauthammer loving the speech, Red State loving the speech. I mean, is this are we seeing sort of a turning point? Do you think that there's enough momentum, was he able to get enough momentum out of this speech to actually come out of what's been a pretty bad couple of months?
Well, I think most interesting for me about the speech is it's an outline of how GOPers, John McCain in particular, are going to run against George Bush while still running on the Iraq War. McCain took Bush to task personally, said he wasn't going to communicate or saying he failed in planning. He said, you know, Rumsfeld definitely is to blame, but he said Bush, being president, is #1 to blame. He also singled out Generals Paces and Sanchez. So this is a guy who everyone acknowledges his election is going to come down to the war, and his solution is to run against George Bush's management of it.
Interesting. All right, really quickly, Fred Thompson, of course, announcing this week that he had indolent lymphoma, sort of a non-threatening form, if you can call it non-threatening form of cancer. He chose to do it, interestingly enough. He did an interview on Fox News, but also...
Before he did the interview on Fox News, he had a post already up at Red State.
Right.
Now, Fox put out their press release first, but my insider sources at Red State tell me that they had the information and the doctor's note before Fox did.
I bet they do.
And it's definitely very evident that Thompson is highly including the bloggers in his rollout of his presidency, as witnessed by his confession on Red State about the lymphoma.
Yeah, and if you're not running for president, you don't go straight to Fox. If you're not running in a Republican presidential primary, you don't go straight to Fox News and straight to the Red State.
As great as Red State is, I am unsure about their medical expertise.
This Fred Thompson thing is actually going to happen. All right, that'll do it. Thank you so much for joining us, Con Carroll. You are
always
once
a
again
pleasure
proving
to
yourself
Sit next to you, John.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
No, your hair's not the best.
Did you say thank you?
No.
Say thank you. You're very welcome.
You're very welcome, John.
Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you.
Chuck Schumer has been very busy these past few weeks, arm-twisting potential Democratic Senate candidates, and we're starting to hear some of them openly mulling challenges. Quinn McCord here to discuss this with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Are they just teasing Schumer, or do any of these folks actually plan on running?
Well, you know, we'll find out soon. You kind of get the feeling that a lot of these potential Senate candidates have been hearing from Schumer on the phone. He keeps badgering them, and finally they just say, all right, you know, I'll throw out some comment about my incumbent senator. You know, Ron Sparks is saying that Jeff Sessions voted for tax increases, or tax cuts that only help 1% of the population.
Right.
DeFazio has said some bad things about Gordon Smith, and just yesterday, Brad Miller in North Carolina, the congressman, said that Elizabeth Dole was a down-the-line partisan Republican.
Right.
So they're obviously, you know, test-driving some messages. Maybe they're kind of tossing out the same messages that the 2006 Democrats who won with.
Right. Well, and we saw also in 2006 that one of the secrets of Schumer's success was having an incredibly effective recruiting operation. At the beginning of the process, he was able to avoid, with a few exceptions, a lot of competitive primaries, maybe the most competitive one being in Montana.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And I think that's what he's trying to do here, too, is sort of pick those top-tier candidates and get them into the race. So far, limited success, but we're seeing that in the next couple of weeks, after these fundraising reports come out,
True.
I think you're going to start to see some movement. Speaking of those fundraising reports, talk about Virginia. What do we think we know?
Well, I just checked the FEC website today, and it looks like John Warner raised all of $500 for the entire first quarter of the...
I raised more than $500 during the first quarter, Quinn.
I know. The DSCC seems very happy about it. I think they may smell a retirement in the air. On the other hand, you know, to play devil's advocate, this might just mean that John Warner is so confident that he will go unchallenged if he actually runs. Maybe he knows Mark Warner won't challenge him if he does run for re-election. And if Mark Warner doesn't run, who else could challenge John Warner?
John Warner hates fundraising. I went back and looked, and in 2002, the exact same thing happened. I remember this cycle, and I remember sort of the buzz about a Warner retirement because he raised almost the equivalent of about $500 during the first quarter of the off year in 2001. You know, so I think, and obviously he then went on to run and to raise a lot of money effectively. So it could just be a guy who says, I just can't stand, I've been busy with these Iraq hearings, I've been busy in the Senate, I can't stand fundraising and I don't want to do it. He obviously could, if he were engaged in fundraising, raise a hell of a lot more money than that.
Oh, I'm sure he could.
And Jean Shaheen, any final word out of Manchester today?
No word from New Hampshire, but you know, it looks like, I bet Schumer's calling the other Democrats saying, just so you know, if Shaheen runs, we're clearing the field.
Right.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
They're clearing sweat. They're not going to sweat it.
No sweat yet.
No sweat yet.
But there could be.
Thank you for being here, Quinn McCord.
Bye.
In Alabama this week, Rudy Giuliani was asked about flying the Confederate flag over the state capitol, and he said that it was a decision best left up to the states. Here to talk about this today, our Giuliani aficionado, Maura O'Brien. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, Maura, did Giuliani flub this question over the flag like so many other Republican and Democratic candidates have?
I think he did, and I mean, I think the thing that's most important is this week Giuliani's kind of established a pattern for himself where he was, you know, first in South Carolina where he was asked about an issue that's currently before the state legislature about women having to look at ultrasound pictures before getting an abortion.
Right.
And he said, let's leave it up to the people of South Carolina. Then he goes to Alabama and he's asked about flying the Confederate flag over the state capitol. He says, let's leave it to, you know, the states to decide.
Right.
And he gives this whole song and dance about Federalist Papers and you know what a great country we live in that you know people can decide in the states. Then most recently he was in Georgia asked about apologizing for slavery, if Georgia should apologize for slavery, and once again he says let's leave it to the states.
Right.
And so it gives it's this pattern where he seems to be almost kind of...
It's almost like tacit consent in
right,
a way.
and so
It's
are his
almost like,
positions on these issues, do they not matter enough to him that he's willing to see them go either way?
I think that's sort of how everything is perceived. Whenever a candidate, a presidential candidate, says, leave it up to the states, it's
Right.
the perception, the way that it's interpreted, I think, by voters is, that's not something that I want to
Right.
stake any political capital on. I don't want to lose any
Doesn't
ground.
mean that much to me.
All right, I'm from New York City.
Right.
I don't really think enough about or I haven't thought enough about the Confederate
Right.
flag. That's
And-
how it's perceived.
And that I mean, that, I think the reason why he flubbed this is because Giuliani, especially in the South, where he doesn't have a lot of the conservative issues working for him,
right.
The thing that people still do really respect about him is he's the so-called, straight-talking New Yorker, or even talking to the legislature in Alabama the other day, he was saying, look, I'm willing to, lose votes. If you don't agree with me,
right.
you don't have to vote for me. It's okay.
Right.
And then he goes, outside, and he can't just, come down and say where he stands, even if it's unpopular.
It also put him at odds, it put some distance between him and John McCain on this issue at the very same time, because McCain, during his interview on 60 Minutes last week, was asked about his position in South Carolina in 2000 when he said that the Confederate flag was a state issue, and he now says that that was one of the most negative, most cynical decisions or positions that he took, and he now regrets it and now feels differently.
He said that he was probably doing it because of ambition, at the time. And so that, it kind of goes against what everybody wants to think about Rudy Giuliani, is that he doesn't do these things for ambition.
Yeah, and not to sound too cynical about Giuliani's position on this, but it really sort of goes against his overall sort of position on his overall states' rights philosophy, which is not a states' rights philosophy, which is that he actually does believe that the federal government has a larger role in making decisions about these sorts of local issues.
Right.
So very interesting. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Maura O'Brien. We
Thank you
love
very
having
much.
you come back sometime soon.
Thank you very much.
Some say Fred Thompson's announcement this week that he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 3 years ago indicates that he is nearing a decision about 2008 and was interested in seeing how people react to his medical condition. Here to talk about this with us, Mark Amender, Associate Hotline Editor. Was this announcement meant to signal his seriousness about 2008?
Look at that bald-headed Tennessean.
Was that a Don Imus joke?
That was a Don Imus joke.
It was
Yes,
good. It was
clearly.
funny.
The answer is absolutely yes. This was done specifically to get it out of the way before he announces. There was no other reason for him to do it, and that was the reason.
And not only no other reason for him to do it, but no other reason for him to do it in the venues that he did it. Look,
Neil
breaking
Cavuto
news,
on
Neil
Fox
Cavuto
News,
and
Red
on
State.
Red State. I mean, clearly aiming to a Republican audience, not to the country as a whole, which is understandable given where he is right now. So, what's his time frame? He's in Washington next week.
Meeting with Republicans on the Hill, a lot of whom initially a year ago thought they would be supporting George Allen for president.
Exactly.
He attends the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast shortly thereafter. And on May 4th, he has a big fundraiser in California. And shortly after that, I think he's gonna get in. I was skeptical a few weeks ago.
I was very skeptical.
And now I'm not skeptical.
But what happens, the interesting story I think inside the Beltway is what happens to that sort of consulting class, to the consulting and the political consulting industry.
Right.
If Thompson does get in, if he starts to rocket to the top of the top tier of the Republican presidential field, the consultants who've already signed on have committed themselves to Romney, Giuliani, and McCain. Where do you see the shakeout in the next couple of weeks?
Well, look, Thompson's most trusted political advisor over the years, national political advisor, has been Alex Castellanos, who is now a senior strategist for Mitt Romney. And obviously everyone knows, everyone who watches this show on a regular basis knows that one of the chief fundraisers in the Republican Party, Ted Welch, is also aboard Team Romney. So it'll be interesting. But there are a handful of very good Republican media firms who have yet to sign on with anybody that could theoretically sign on with them. But you'll probably be seeing, if he rockets to the top of the polls, a bit of regret. But you make your bed, you lie in it. Right.
Well, I think as we've seen with John McCain over the past couple of months, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It doesn't have a direct impact on the success or failure of the campaign.
How many consultants you have?
How many consultants and what sort of organization?
Although this week he's McCain's trimming his consultant base just a little bit.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us, Mark Amender. Pleasure to see you.
My pleasure.
It's the 2-minute warnings. Here to join us is our favorite 2-minute warning aficionado, Catherine Lear.
Hello, John.
A reporter asked John McCain this week, is General Petraeus now in effect your campaign manager? Catherine, is it fair to say that John Weaver relinquished his command a long time ago?
I mean, John, does anyone really command John McCain?
Ouch.
He is a maverick, after all.
Indeed.
MSNBC on Wednesday said it will drop its simulcast of Imus in the Morning. John, is there a place for Don Imus on The View?
The view from the rear view mirror, maybe. All right, Elizabeth Edwards said she has a rabid Republican neighbor. Catherine, Did she use a credit card and night vision goggles to break into his house and figure this out?
How do they even know they have neighbors? Their property is so large.
Indeed.
Okay, Oregon may join as many as 21 other states in the rush to hold a primary next February 5th. John, what is 6 more people, right?
Yeah, but if you include Peter DeFazio, it's more like 600.
That's a good point.
Go. Oh, no, I go. Joe Wilson and Valerie Plame have settled down in Santa Fe to a new life of tie-dye and Turkish jewelry. Is this just their latest covert mission for the CIA?
Well, I don't know. Apparently, they're going to join their new governor, Bill Richardson, on his next trip to North Korea.
Interesting.
Interesting, indeed.
Very good.
All right, John, Ike Skelton, the seemingly mild-mannered chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, is apparently a Taekwondo aficionado who can break 3 boards with 1 sidekick.
My lord.
Did you know this?
Sure, that's how he got his nickname, Helter Skelton. Bum. And that'll do it for today. Thanks for joining us on Hotline TV.